culture, that's 2-week culture, and the Tyson bird that it had 40 chlorine baths, averaged 3,600 colony forming units per milliliter to the second permutation. And I already don't know what that means, but some of you do. And ours averaged 133 CFU per milliliter to the second permutation. That's 2,500% cleaner.
Wow.
So you can measure it that way. You can measure
without chlorine, yeah.
You can measure it from a job standpoint. The amount of jobs created from per $100,000 worth of product put through here. This creates 3 times more jobs per pound of product than a big Tyson chicken house. All right. So if you're interested in jobs bills and jobs creations, this is the way to create jobs. If you want to measure it from an environmental standpoint, pollution standpoint, air pollution, water pollution, any of those standards, this shows up. I mean, we could go on, but my point is, by any standard you want to measure this, pathogenicity, foodborne bacterial contamination. Half of all cases of diarrhea in the United States are caused by foodborne bacteria, 80% of that from poultry. What's a case of diarrhea worth? Add that to the cost of 69-cent chicken, suddenly the cost just went up to $1.29. The point is that however you want to measure this, any measure, it beats the competition hands down. And yet, this is what is vilified and demonized by the powers that be.
And we can't change that because the whole scalable thing that you talked about in Portland. Why can't we change the laws to make it?
We don't have big lobbies.
We don't have lobbyists.
We don't have lobbyists. We don't have. That's why we need to join Oregon Consumers and Farmers Association, so we have a voice. In Virginia now that we have with Bigfoot, we're only several hundred members, but when something like this happens, guess what? We activate our phone lines and call the bureaucrat. And, I mean, it jams his phone line. His whole log gets full of angry people calling him. I'd like to create an Ass of the Year award for the most ridiculous bureaucrat that harasses farmers and have a big press release and a big, banquet in Richmond and invite the politicians and offer, in absentia probably, the Ass of the Year award for the most ridiculous bureaucrat. You know what I'm saying? I mean, have fun with it, enjoy it. But this is the kind of stuff that we need to do to create, and we can have also offer a Helper of the Year award to the politician that puts in a bill to exempt or free up or create accountability. And like Tyler said, look, set a standard, set a benchmark, so many parts per million, whatever. There's no reason. We have the technology right now. The technology exists right now that for a very little money, and when I say very little, I mean like less than $5,000, we could have a little R2-D2 machine right here that we take a swab sample, stick it in using infrared scanning technology, scan that, it spits it straight into a computer in the Capitol, okay? And if it's under the benchmark, good. And if it's not, a bell goes off and we get a visit, or you know what I'm saying? What's wrong with that? But see, when I presented that to my federal inspector, he said, well, that's a great idea, it would work. And then he said, oh, then I'd be out of a job. So they don't want it to go to empirical science, because then you wouldn't need all the people to sniff and smell. And it would take the subjectivity out of it.
It's the only part that they don't want to go to empirical science, because everything else is scientific. I mean, I don't remember, was it you that was yesterday that was talking all about the science?
Yeah.
I mean, the science of the industrial agricultural system. It's nothing but science.
It's pseudoscience.
Yeah.
It's pseudoscience.
Yeah.
And what we're saying is we could go to true empirical science this way, establish benchmarks, and go with it. But then the whole the federal worker lobby is opposed to it, because then that would reduce their jobs. And of course, I think, you know, we could reduce their jobs fine, and they could come gut chickens for me. It would be a great job for them to do. But you know, I was down when we were trying to. If you get my book, Everything I Want to Do Is Illegal, there's a chapter in there, The Million-Mile Chicken. That's my favorite chapter in the book. And it's about when a guy tried to take our chickens to the DuPont Circle Farmers Market, which is less than 150 miles from our house, but because it crossed the state line, he had to get them federal inspected, and the closest federal inspection place was south 500 miles. So to get it to Farmers Market in D.C., we had to take the chickens 400 miles south to an inspected facility, and then bring them another 300 miles to his place to get bagged and cut up, and then since his place was 150 miles south of my place, then it was 300 more miles up to the farmer's market in order just to sell them 100 miles from our house. And so I was standing there on the line next to the federal inspector right here at this little independent processing facility, and his normal place was at one of these great big, you know, Tyson, Gold Kiss, whatever places, and of course he didn't know me from Adam, and what he said. Of course, I engaged him in conversation and was very diplomatic and very congenial, and you know, he's the greatest guy in the world. And I'm so glad you exist, and I'm just really thankful that our chickens are going through into your eyes, because I wouldn't trust them otherwise. And warmed him up, you know, and he then let it slip. He said, "Well, I can tell you one thing." He said, "The worst chicken of this group here today is better than the best chicken at Gold Kiss that I spent the day yesterday." What's interesting, though, is that because they're coming, this was a little facility about twice the size of this, about 16 workers. The birds were coming across real slowly, and they were coming, and so he could actually see if there was a problem. So what happens is, when you look at statistics, the smaller the plant, the higher the reject, you know, abscessed breasts or deformed livers, the higher the reject list goes up. Has nothing to do with the number per thousand, and it's given in you know, rejects per thousand or cull rate per thousand. And so as the processing plants go down the smaller scale, the reject cull numbers go way up per thousand. It has nothing to do with those chickens being worse. All it is in this plant, the inspector actually could look at them. In the big plants, they go sailing by at one every second, and they can't even see them. So the consumer rights, the Ralph Nader rights, the consumer advocacy groups, they get on and they take this statistic and go down and say, see, these little plants are dirty and have all these cull rates. These backyard chickens are all abscessed and messed up. When the truth is that they're the only little plants that inspectors can see the birds. And so that gets on the page of the New York Times, you know, small plants are dirtier, or Consumer Reports. If you read Consumer Reports on pasture poultry, they took these statistics and put in that, you know, these birds are way, the cull rate is way higher than they are on the big confinement factories. And the reason is because we do them in small plants where inspectors actually look them over and see them. So, you know, that's, oh me.
So,
exciting stuff.
3 things that you can do. Number 1, when